November 12, 1943. Camp Concordia, Kansas. Klaus Schneider stood at the entrance to the mess hall, 18 years old and hollow-cheeked, staring at more food than he had seen in 2 years. Steam rose from industrial kettles, carrying the scent of beef stew and fresh bread across wooden tables where American guards ate, shoulder to shoulder with German prisoners. His hands trembled, not from cold, but from the devastating realization forming in his mind. Everything the regime had taught him was a lie. Before we continue this story, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss more untold stories from World War II. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, whether it's Berlin, Boston, or Brisbane. We want to hear from you. Now let's return to that moment when a single breakfast destroyed years of propaganda. The mess hall stretched longer than any building Klaus had ever entered as a prisoner. Yellow light spilled from windows into the gathering dusk. Inside, the warmth hit him like a physical force. He could see scrambled eggs, mountains of them, golden and fluffy. Bacon laid out in rows that seemed endless. Toast stacked high, glistening with butter. Fried potatoes, fresh fruit. Coffee steaming in metal urns. His stomach clenched so hard he had to stop walking. A German-speaking American soldier noticed him frozen in the doorway. "First time?" the soldier asked, his accent heavy but his tone kind. Klaus managed a nod. "Take what you want," the soldier said. "You can come back for seconds." In that moment, Klaus understood that Germany had already lost the war. 6 months earlier, Klaus had surrendered in Tunisia. He emerged from a collapsed bunker with his hands raised and his ribs visible through torn uniform fabric. The Afrika Korps was finished. The desert had consumed everything: water, food, hope. For weeks before the surrender, Klaus and his unit had survived on hard-tack biscuits and whatever they could scavenge. Some days, nothing at all. The British processed him at a temporary camp near Tunis, where dust settled over everything, and men stood in long lines for water that tasted of chemicals. Then came the ship, a converted cargo vessel that crossed the Atlantic in convoy, while submarines hunted beneath the waves. Klaus spent that crossing in the hold, pressed against other prisoners, breathing air thick with the smell of unwashed bodies and sickness. They fed them canned soup and hard biscuits, more than he had eaten in Tunisia, but not enough to stop the gnawing emptiness that had become part of his body. He carried 3 photographs in his pack, his mother and 2 younger sisters, taken before the war consumed every able-bodied man. His mother's last letter, which had reached him in Tunisia just before the collapse, spoke of rationing growing more severe. Air raids that sent families to cellars. Neighbors whose sons never returned from the Eastern Front. She wrote that she prayed for him every night. Klaus had stopped believing in God somewhere between Hamburg and North Africa, but he kept the letter anyway. America revealed itself gradually, first as a smudge on the horizon, then as impossible green, finally as a harbor crowded with ships and the organized chaos of a nation that produced everything in endless abundance. They disembarked at Norfolk, Virginia, where November air felt warm compared to German winters. American soldiers processed them with efficient indifference, checking documents, assigning numbers, loading them onto trains that would carry them inland. The train journey lasted 3 days. Klaus pressed his face against the window and watched America scroll past. Forests that went on forever. Farmland so flat it made the sky feel infinite, towns untouched by war. In Germany, cities lay in rubble. Here children played in streets that had never known bombardment. They had been told America was suffering, that German U-boats were starving the enemy, that American cities were collapsing under the weight of a war they couldn't sustain. But the evidence outside the train window told a different story. If this was suffering, what did that make Germany? The other prisoners talked in low voices. Some said American camps were brutal, that prisoners were worked to death or left to starve. Others had heard different stories. Klaus listened but said little. He had learned that survival meant keeping your head down and your expectations low. Kansas announced itself as flatness elevated to philosophy. The land stretched in every direction without impediment. Only distant grain elevators and windmills broke the horizon. The sky dominated everything. So much empty blue that it felt like drowning in reverse. They arrived at Camp Concordia at sunset, when the light turned everything golden. The camp sprawled across former farmland rows of wooden barracks, surrounded by wire fences and guard towers. All of it clean and new and somehow temporary-looking. American guards processed them at the main gate, checking documents again, assigning barracks, explaining rules in English that some prisoners understood and others had translated. Klaus was assigned to Barracks 7, Block C. He found a bunk halfway down the row and claimed it by placing his small pack on the thin mattress. Around him, other prisoners moved with the careful efficiency of men who had learned to secure their small territories in a world that constantly tried to erase their individuality. The barracks were heated. This registered slowly, competing with exhaustion and hunger for Klaus's attention. In Tunisia, he had shivered through desert nights that dropped to freezing. But here, radiators along the walls pumped out heat that made the air feel thick and drowsy. It was a small thing, but to Klaus it felt like the first genuine kindness he had experienced in months. That first night, they were fed bread and soup. The bread was white and soft, nothing like the dense, dark loaves Klaus remembered from home or the sawdust-textured rations in North Africa. The soup was thin but hot, tasting of vegetables and something that might have been chicken. Klaus ate slowly, forcing himself not to gulp. Around him, prisoners ate in silence. No one fought for food. No one hoarded their bread. There was enough. This simple fact-abundance where he expected scarcity unsettled him more than any guard's weapon. He lay awake that night listening to 50 other men, breathing, feeling the radiator's heat, trying to reconcile what he'd been taught with what he was experiencing. Dawn came early to Kansas. The sun rose over an endless horizon that offered nothing to hide behind. Klaus woke to the sound of a bell not harsh or military, just a simple signal that the day had begun. Breakfast was announced. They would eat in shifts in the main mess hall. Klaus's group was assigned to the second shift, which meant waiting. He used the time to explore the barracks. There were showers, actual showers with hot water. There was a small library with books in German. There was a bulletin board with notices explaining camp rules, work assignments, and educational opportunities. A prisoner named Otto approached Klaus as he examined the library. "First time in a proper camp?" Otto asked. Klaus nodded. "This is different," Klaus said. Otto laughed. "They treat us not well exactly, but fair. Geneva Convention rules. Food 3 times a day. Some of the boys say it's better than home was before we left. The bell rang again. Time for Block C's breakfast shift. They filed out into morning air that bit with November cold, crossing the compound toward the mess hall. Klaus noticed that the guards weren't particularly hostile. They watched, alert but not aggressive. One guard nodded at a prisoner who had tripped a gesture of acknowledgment that carried neither mockery nor menace. The mess hall rose before them. Smoke came from its chimneys. Even from outside, Klaus could smell cooking bacon, coffee, something sweet like cinnamon. His stomach clenched. Saliva flooded his mouth so suddenly he had to swallow hard. He had not smelled bacon in so long that the scent carried him backward through time to Sunday mornings in Hamburg, when his father was still alive, and life contained such ordinary pleasures. They entered through double doors that swung wide. Klaus stopped so abruptly that the prisoner behind him bumped into his back. The mess hall stretched into seeming infinity. Rows of long tables with benches, each already set with plates and utensils. At the far end, a serving line stretched beneath industrial hoods. Behind the line, American soldiers stood ready with ladles and spoons, but it was the food itself that stopped his breathing. Scrambled eggs, mountains of them, yellow and fluffy and real. Bacon, strips of it laid out in rows that seemed to go on forever. Toast, stacks of buttered bread. Fried potatoes with onions. Fruit apples and oranges in bowls at intervals. Coffee in large urns. Pitchers of milk that looked impossibly white and fresh. Klaus had been eating military rations for months. He thought he understood what enemy abundance looked like. But this was different. This wasn't survival rations or field provisions. This was a normal breakfast, served every morning to prisoners who were technically still the enemy. First time? An American soldier at the serving line spoke in accented German. Klaus realized he'd been standing frozen, staring. Yes, Klaus managed. "Take what you want," the soldier said. "You can come back for seconds if you're still hungry. Most of you guys are pretty thin when you arrive. We got plenty. No need to go hungry here." The soldier smiled, a genuine expression that transformed his face from official to friendly. Klaus moved down the line in a daze. A soldier ladled eggs onto his plate. Another added bacon. A third placed 2 slices of toast alongside the rest. At the end, someone handed him coffee and pointed toward milk and sugar on the tables. Klaus found a seat between Otto and a quiet prisoner who looked even younger than Klaus himself. He sat down and stared at his plate. The eggs were still steaming. The bacon had been cooked crispy, just the way his mother had always made it when bacon was something families could afford. The toast had real butter melting into its surface. He picked up his fork. His hand was shaking. "Take your time," Otto said quietly. "First day, lots of guys can't keep it down. Your stomach's forgotten what real food is like." Klaus cut a small piece of egg, lifted it to his mouth. The flavor exploded across his tongue, salt and butter, and the rich completeness of actual chicken eggs, not powdered substitute. He chewed slowly, swallowed, waited for his stomach's response. When nausea came, he took another bite. The bacon came next. He had forgotten that food could be crispy, could have texture beyond soft mush or hard density. The bacon crunched between his teeth, releasing flavors that seemed impossible, smoke and salt and fat that his body recognized as precisely what it needed. Around him, other prisoners ate with varying degrees of control. Some forced themselves to go slowly. Others ate with desperate speed, as if the food might be taken away. A few became sick and had to leave, their bodies unable to process sudden abundance after months of deprivation. Klaus made it through half his plate before his stomach signaled it could take no more. He sat back, breathing carefully, fighting nausea. His plate still held eggs, bacon, potatoes. In Tunisia, leaving food would have been unthinkable. Here, looking around, Klaus saw that many prisoners left partial plates, secure in knowing that lunch would come, that dinner would follow, that tomorrow would bring another breakfast just like this one. An American soldier named Becker was moving through the mess hall, refilling coffee cups. He stopped at Klaus's table, saw the half-eaten plate. "Can't finish it?" "That's normal," Becker said in accented German. "Your body needs time to adjust. Try to drink the milk, though protein and calories, in an easier form." "He's right," Otto said. "First week you'll feel sick after every meal. By the end of the month you'll eat like you're trying to make up for lost time. Most of us gain 20 pounds in the first few months. Start looking human again." Klaus touched his own face, feeling the sharp angles at his cheekbones. "They do this for all prisoners, every camp," Otto said. "Geneva Conventions says POWs get the same rations as the captor's base troops. Americans take that seriously. We eat what their soldiers eat. This isn't special treatment. This is just normal for them." The truth settled into Klaus like stones sinking through water. Germany had fought for 4 years, conquered much of Europe, drained the resources of entire nations, and still its soldiers and civilians had starved. America, fighting across oceans and continents, had enough abundance to feed its enemies. The propaganda hadn't been exaggerated. It had been a lie from the beginning. America wasn't weak. Germany wasn't invincible. Believing had simply been easier than questioning. Camp life fell into rhythm. Meals, work, evenings before lights out. Klaus worked in the wood shop under an American sergeant named Walsh, who taught through patience instead of threats. Mistakes were corrected quietly. At lunch there were thick sandwiches, hot soup, and desserts that felt obscene for a prison camp, more food than Klaus once ate in a day. As his body recovered, nausea faded. Hunger became honest. His thoughts cleared. Evenings were strangers still. Prisoners played chess, read, and attended classes. Klaus joined an English course taught by a professor from Kansas City. "You'll need it," the man said. "When this ends, Germany will have to rebuild." 3 weeks later, a Red Cross letter arrived. His mother was alive. His sisters were safe. Hamburg was bombed again. Their home was gone. Klaus folded the letter and left his untouched meal. He stood by the fence, fed and warm, while his mother survived among ruins. Otto joined him. "We all get the same news," he said. "And here we are eating 3 meals a day." That evening, Klaus returned to English class. They practiced family phrases. "My mother lives in Hamburg. I have 2 sisters." His accent was thick, but improving. He imagined a future where Americans might see Germans as individuals, not enemies. At dinner, Klaus forced himself to eat everything. Survival, he realized, was its own resistance. Every kindness exposed the lies he'd been taught. His recovery from starving soldier to healthy young man was proof the ideology that sent him to war had failed. December brought brutal cold and snow-covered prairie. The Americans announced a Christmas celebration. Klaus volunteered to help decorate. Prisoners folded paper stars and chains, blending German and American traditions. On Christmas Eve, the mess hall glowed with lights. Tables were covered in white. Packages waited at each place. The meal was astonishing turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, sweet potatoes, bread, and apple pie. Major Henderson spoke, Sergeant Walsh translating. "Tonight we celebrate because we are still human. You are prisoners, but also sons and fathers. You have families who pray for you, so do we. This war will end, and we will have to live together again. Merry Christmas." Applause spread through the mess hall, hesitant at first, then full and unguarded. Some prisoners wept openly, faces unused to such release. Klaus felt his own eyes burn. They ate together, conversation crossing languages through laughter, tone, and gesture. American guards sat among them, sharing the same food. Someone began singing "Still Not." Soon the entire hall joined in. When they reached "Sleep in Heavenly Peace," Klaus's voice broke. He thought of his mother in her shelter, his sisters far away, families shattered by a war that had promised glory and delivered only loss. After dinner, packages were opened. Inside were simple gifts: chocolate, cigarettes, paper, pencils, toiletries. Nothing extravagant, just proof they were still seen as human. Klaus's package held American chocolate and a small wooden pencil carved with the words "Camp Concordia, Kansas, 1943. He turned it slowly in his hand. With it he could write to his mother, tell her he was alive and treated well. The regime had warned capture meant torture. Instead, there were heated barracks, full meals, and pencils given freely at Christmas. Music followed. An American played guitar while a German prisoner played harmonica. O Tannenbaum blended with joy to the world, belonging to no nation only, to people who had known winter and hoped for spring. Walking back to his barracks, pockets heavy with chocolate, Klaus understood the war was already lost, even if the fighting continued. A nation that starved its people could not compete with one that fed its enemies. That night, by barracks light, Klaus wrote to his mother. He told her he was safe. He told her the Americans were not what they'd been taught. He wrote carefully, knowing the censors, but he wrote honestly. He sealed the letter, lay in his bunk, listened to the breathing around him, felt the warmth of radiators, and cried, not from sorrow, but from relief and from the devastating realization that everything he had believed had been wrong. Klaus remained at Camp Concordia until 1946. He learned English, gained weight, taught carpentry, and wrote home often. When he returned to Germany, he carried photographs, a letter of recommendation, and the wooden pencil. He kept that pencil until his death in 1987. It had written thousands of words, but its greatest message was silent. Even in war, humanity could endure. That Christmas meal had defeated the regime in his heart more completely than any bomb, because it proved dignity and mercy were not weaknesses, but strength